Somebody do me a favor because I don't have Opera. Somebody out there has an Opera browser. I want you to pull up facebook.com, post the response in the chat room, if you would. Can you do that? Somebody? Just post the response in the chat room. You have to have Opera. All right. While you're doing that, I'm going to see the response. Why? Because, listen, this is what a lot of people miss. Every time you look for a domain, right? If something is wrong internally with the company itself, the message is going to be different. If it all of a sudden you can't get to it because of an overwhelming issue, right? It's going to give you a different message. Opera normally will give you a pretty good message to let you know if it's an internal server error or not. Here's one thing I do know. Facebook was and is accessible. You just can't access it from the internet. How about that? Not from the public internet. There are several ways you can see if servers are operational. They are operational. They've been operational all day. It's just that people have not been able to connect with them. Why? Because their port was shut down. Their master port was shut down. And this is part of that BGP protocol that they're using, Border Gateway Protocol, which is what, to make it simple, when you utilize artificial intelligence as a very important protocol, and if you're lifting your whole system to one of those protocols where it can have a master domain over everything else, well then, there you go. That's probably one of the main issues. They have spread servers, right? Spread services. So it's almost impossible for any team of people to just simply knock them out from overwhelming them, because they've been trying that for years. That never worked. Why? Because they just hop to another system. But when you're transporting one operational system from one platform to another, well, you can run into issues. And if the AI rejects, it's kind of like a kidney, right? You put a kidney into a person, the person rejects the kidney. Well, that's what we're facing here. But that's still largely, that's an overview, but the internal specifics of it, Facebook knows, and so does the federal government. They know too. Trust me, they know, because you're not going to have a system that is blind or that they can't look into. That would be crazy. Half the technology people use on the internet was from DARPA. So how couldn't they look into it? I'm just trying to let you know some things that are obvious, so nobody runs off. You really want to have a pretty good grasp of the technology so that you can understand what is actually happening. By and large, it's good that we have this, right? So that we don't start looking in the wrong direction. That's what, trust me, during the days that we live in, there are dark forces that would just love us to look in the wrong direction. You point a Christian in the right direction, and then darkness is in trouble, right? It's in trouble, which means they're upping their rhetoric to point Christians in the wrong direction. And we have to be careful of that in these days, very careful of that, to stay founded on Christ in all things, to receive revelation and keep going forward with what we're going forward with, not making moves based on wrong information, which is why I'm going to cover some of these, some of the things I know about China, so that you guys have a good idea of what's actually been happening. There is a power switch, right? It's a power switch. In other words, who was in power 5 years ago below the U.S. is no longer in power. They're just not. You're looking at a country, China. Think of this one. This will really get you, for those of you who understand. China is coming out or has a sixth generation fighter by Western standards. There you go. I give you a moment of pause to swallow that one. China. What in the world are we doing, right? Now, of course, the U.S. is coming out with quite a few things. Most people think the the 35 and 22 series aircraft. Those are fifth generation aircraft, are top of the line. We've got three others above that. Probably about four others, to be honest with you. But we also have sixth generation fighters. We have those. But China has one. Somebody says, well, the public knows about fifth generation. There's no way they're going to know about sixth generation until a conflict comes around. In other words, the public is not going to know. It's just like when the Gulf War came around. Right before the Gulf War, everybody just, they swore up and down that the greatest aircraft we had, the stealth aircraft, was the SR series and some of the bombers that we had. They said, that's it. And they would swear by that because that's all they knew. 1991 came around, some aircraft were introduced, and they said, oops. It's exactly what they said. So in wartime, you see new technology. Before wartime, you don't see new technology. There's no need for a civilian to know, right? And that would just be irresponsible to tell anybody, any civilian outside, any military individuals outside of those who have a need to know what you actually have. Yeah, we have more fighters, but so does China. So does China, which is why they're so brazen and emboldened. Why? Here's one thing you may not know. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but one of the radars that the world was really seeking to have in their arsenal was the ASA system. It's called the ASA system. Anyway, this is a radar system that is really up to date, right? It is the standard. It's a scan array radar system. Russia has one, but they've tested one, they fielded one, but it's really not employed largely over all their aircraft. And right now, I believe they have the Su-57, and they have a higher, almost a hybrid fifth generation aircraft that will use some standardized components of what we use, Western. The Western world sets a standard on aircraft. Well, we used to. Something has happened with China that most people, well, maybe you don't know about it. Maybe you don't know what has really happened with technology in China over the years. Now, everybody knows that most of what you buy dealing with technology is what? Made in China. Well, it used to be, correct? It's made in China. Let's go ahead and face the facts. The other half of that, like the other electronic components, come from Taiwan. Long time ago, Russia was neck and neck with the U.S. as far as air superiority, right? Russia was. They had their mixed series aircraft, and we had our aircraft, and this is when things really start to evolve. But the Soviets had given China a lot of information regarding their MiG aircraft, of which China made these domestic clones of the Soviet J-5, right? The J-6 and J-7. Those became, I believe, MiG-17, 19, 21 fighters in the MiG series. 1991, of course, with the Soviet collapse, Russia granted China a fourth generation aircraft, the Su-27. This is where everything began. So this is when they were in the fourth generation fighters. And what China did, well, also the Su-30 flanker jets. But what China did, China's Aviation Corporation, right, developed three clones of that flanker, which became very popular. They were the J-11, the J-15, and J-16. Right, J-15, of course, is a carrier-based multi-role fighter. That's the J-15. China took these aircraft and superseded Russia as far as their capabilities, range, and everything else for one reason, right? Even today, China, somebody says, Mike, you sound like a writer for 5G. Oh, well, I don't know who that is. But if we're going to rush through this, but China took these aircraft, they took them, broke them down, found out just about every single aspect of their, technology and how they work, and they made something, twice as good. This is when they began to supersede Russia. Now, Russia still has thrust vectoring, so does the U.S. We hold a standard, by the way, in thrust vectoring aircraft. China was not able to reproduce that because they were still importing turbofan engines from Russia because they couldn't fully develop their own thrust vectoring system like the WS-10V or the WS-15. So it would get all that out the way. China cloned them. China's up to this modern day, right? Right now, Russia right now spends $70 billion on their defense, right? How much do you think China spends on their defense? Anybody? Take a guess. China spends $190 billion on their defense. How about that one? How about that one? Let's continue to go. China exceeds any country's expertise in civilian electronics. Do you guys know that? Now, where do we get most of our military electronics from? Where do the ideas come from? The civilian sector. That's where they come from. But China exceeds any country in their expertise in civilian electronics. It just surpasses every country out there. So what does that mean? That means the average household in China is much smarter than the average household in any other country. And it used to be Germany. Germany were the engineers of the world. These guys were so precise in what they were doing, but it appears to be that most countries enjoying peace and they got fat and prideful, and their mind is still stuck in the past when they were the best. But something else is taking place. It really has, which is why, it gets to me how a person, and all of us have to be careful of this. So I'm going to go over principles while I'm talking about this too. There's so many times when we become complacent with where we are, we forget the fight that was originally in us. We forget the reasons why we would strive the way we did. And then all of a sudden something happens. We wake up and say, man, I'm about 5 years behind where I should have been. If I would have kept going, I would have been way up here. But no, I had to slow down and enjoy myself. And I just totally messed up. Well, when you come to that realization, it's too late. Normally you come to that realization when you pay the price for something. Something breaks down, you start paying a price. If we would just continue, right, with that same vigor, I want to say, with that same mindset going forward, not slowing down because we think we made it, but utilizing those God-given talents and abilities to continue to forge our path forward, we would never fall behind. Even as in our walks as Christians, we would never fall behind if we would search for the Lord the way we searched for him in the beginning. We would never slow down. We would never become weary. We would never have to face depression, oppression, and all these things. We wouldn't. Why? We would be girded up from head to toe in the full armor of the living God always, because we would be on a pursuit, and we would not let anything take us away from that path. Right? So anyway, right now, China exceeds us as far as household to household. But here's what happens. Those people who develop electronics, they eventually become a corporation. In China's case, they have two corporations that they deal with. And most of these corporations, they make defense technologies, right? And this is by Western style standards. We're not talking about just rating China with Chinese things. No, this is, if you were to match the Western world and China, you'd find that we have massive deficiencies. And it really comes from a spoiled people who are not hungry, right? It's almost like we have nothing to fight. And so we take our time. We do. Because we cannot see what's eating back at us, right? I just can't see that. So China copies technologies. They've been doing this from day one. It's not like what they used to have is original. No, they copied everything. In fact, let me tell you this small fact. They took an American helicopter. I'm not going to name which one. And within 2 weeks, they built it. They built a clone of this aircraft. Now, normally China they'll hack systems. Right, they will. They hack systems. And they get plans, and they get this, that, and the other, and specifications. But even that, to go and take those specifications, those blueprints, and build one within 2 weeks, and then test it, right, in that second week, and it is successful. Okay, that's mind-blowing. To do something like that 2 weeks. To take something from a blueprint, right, to the air in 2 weeks. Are you kidding me? You kidding me? So that's just outrageous. But this is what they do. Now, the one thing they lack, especially in air power, they lack experience. But you guys know what experience is, right? Experience means you've been flying an old rusted bucket through the air, and you've been doing it many more hours than anybody else. That's what experience is. When you have flight experience, it doesn't mean you're a better pilot. That's not what it means. It means you have more experience in the air. It by no means doesn't mean you're a better pilot. It just means you have more experience in the air. Do you guys understand that? So you got to be careful of the terms too, because that throws people off all the time. And of course, Russia, they've been rotating a lot. They rotate their combat personnel in and out of the Syrian civil war. Everybody knows about that. And of course, the Russian aerospace forces, they still have special platforms that they keep. So China, their current lead over Russia came from one element. They took the aircraft, they copied them, they made them better, much more efficient, much better electronics. But they did something that everybody tries to do. And here's the heart and soul of it. China came up with a few composite materials. See, when you build an aircraft, it contains metal. And so over the life cycle of that aircraft, you want to replace as much metal with composite materials as possible. Because what that does, when you replace metals with composite materials, you have a lighter aircraft, which translates into higher than normal speed, range, and agility, so on and so on, for a given platform. When you have that, you also have higher speed weapons, right? Which gives you a tactical advantage over the enemy. So if you have a lighter aircraft and much more sturdier, they're sturdier by all measures compared to steel, you're doing a good job. And if you can make that aircraft lighter, you're going to have more agility than the other pilots. But your weapons are going to shoot further. And when you're dealing with aircraft, one of the key goals of aircraft is to be so far out of range that your enemy cannot see you. And if he did see you, he cannot hit you before you can get him, right? That's what the whole deal is. So, what is that? Shivian? Is that Shivian? Somebody have to check me on this, but Shivian Aircraft Corp. I believe that's the Aircraft Corp who did they came up with all these composite materials and techniques, and they really messed up. I know American intelligence was kind of taken back when they saw the composite materials that these guys were using. How can you make something that's the strength of titanium, twice as light as anything you've ever seen? This is what China does. When it comes to composite materials, they're seemingly experts. Well, they were hungry. So then that leads us up to the Su-35 jets, right? Now they have the Su-35 has something called the UBRS, E-Passive Electronic Scan Array. It's a PESA radar is what it is. And those radars can detect things up to 250 miles away, which is pretty good, pretty good science. We have ASA. Remember that. We use an ASA system. And that's the standard in today's radars for tactical aircraft, giving it, and it gives an aircraft an ability to track multiple targets, 20, 30 targets out there at the same time simultaneously. You can track them, engage them if you have the firepower to do that. That's one of the advantages of the ASA system. So guess what China did? China finally, they have the ASA system. Finally, they have the ASA system. Which is not good, because if China has an ASA system and we have the ASA system, that radar, they can track multiple targets at a great distance, and so can we. So now it's left up to a matter of what? Engagement and weapons, right? And sheer numbers is what it comes up with. So China has a weird, it's a J-20. It's called the Mighty Dragons compared to our USF-22. It's directly comparable to our USF-22, which is a fifth generation. You guys know about the YF series aircraft, right? So they have one that is comparable to ours. This is by U.S. standards, not China standards. And so, but it's much lighter than ours. Russia's totally out of the ball game. Do you guys know that? That's why Russia's so far behind. They're out of the ball game. Russia's Su-57 is just not a good aircraft. It just does not have good flight characteristics. It crashed coming out the hangar a few times, even when they were trying to test fly it and everything else. They had some bad things happen to it. It's just plagued by issues. So they're kind of out of the fifth generation game. So now it's up to the U.S. and China, right? Which is why everybody's breaking their neck coming up with the 6th gen fighters, of which China already has one. So they have the J-20, but they also been developing, 4 other fighters, and one is a J-31 Gyro Falcon, that's a carrier-based, another carrier-based fighter, which will replace their J-15. So with these aircraft, because we have the 22 and 35 programs, but it looks like they copied our aircraft, added their technology to it with some tricks, because they mistakenly let out one trick. You know what that is? Their radars can also destroy. So imagine this. Imagine a radar that has this, you have this beam going out from the radar, right? They can, with a flip of a switch, turn that into a microwave weapon and turn it right back to a radar again, frying any missile that comes into proximity into that their kill zone. So, my goodness, what do you do against that? Where they're riding around with a bubble that can destroy any missile that comes in proximity to its radar. And by the way, we're talking about ASAT range. So we're talking about a little bit more than 250 miles. So imagine a radar or a microwave bubble that's powerful enough to kill any missile coming to it. And this is why they're so brazen, because what we're getting to now, that's just the manned aircraft. Those are the manned aircraft. We haven't even gotten into some of the drones you wouldn't believe some of the drones these guys are coming up with. Most of the toys, and it was so laughable because China leads the world when it comes to drone technology. They lead the world. We have our way of doing it. They have their way, right? But they had the best testers, kids. They did. Children, kids. So they make these little toys, right? The Shangnu Corporation, the Cheyenne Aircraft Corporation, all these other corporations, they're making these drones, and they're getting all this feedback data, this flight data back from them, right? And they're fine tuning how these drones operate. Now, Israel is the only one that can ever. Well, they're a little bit below, but they're still on par with the U.S., China, and some of the other. Turkey is one of them too, believe it or not. Did you guys know that? Turkey leads Russia in drone technology. Turkey does. It's the USA, it's China. Then you have some Israel, and then you have on that same plane, though, is Turkey. You have some other countries I'm not going to mention, but you'd be surprised who's leading the way in drone technology as far as the lethality of them. Because why do you think everybody's trying to field supersonic missiles? Now, Russia does have hypersonic missiles. But they also have one of the most dangerous drones that anybody has ever seen. You guys know what that is? It's not for the air. It's for the ocean. It's a submarine. It's a drone. It's an unmanned submarine that carries nuclear warheads. And no doubt, last time I checked, it was armed with hypersonic vehicles on there that can carry a nuclear payload. How they made that work, I don't know. But they did. Which means you could have those. They're so difficult to detect. Number one, because of their size, because of their signature and everything else. They're very difficult to detect. They know that. We know that painfully for several reasons, but they're very difficult to detect, which means they could pull up alongside a beach or something like that. You wouldn't even know it till it was too late. You would not know it. Nobody would know it till it's too late because they're drones, right? They can sit there. Nobody's going to make noise in these things for days. They can sit there for days, for months if necessary, and loiter, you know. So, boy, it's getting kind of crazy. But anyway, China is second with air superiority, and their surface sea vessels. they're not playing around. They're not playing around. And more, you're seeing that they're making global moves all over the earth, and no one is stopping them. No one's able to stop them. They've deployed combat troops all over the place. Now they're positioned in the Middle East, which really draws my attention, because I have a suspicion that when they position themselves in the Middle East, right? Because them, Iran, and Russia are so close. They're going to join agendas. Nobody will be able to withstand them. Nobody. We can't get enough troop power over there yet. Now, one way this can happen is this. If Jerusalem is trampled underfoot, you better believe that we're going to be tied up before that happens. And this is part of the sobriety lesson here. Something we can never forget. Because we know that's in the Bible. And although a lot of people dispute the timing of things, I can't stand the same. I'm not on the same platform as these guys. I have my suspicion that the U.S. is going to have its hands full. Right? I said this many years ago. Just to COT folks, and it looks like it's unfolding. You guys remember when I said if Israel is trampled underfoot, while everybody else was talking about the formation of things and as far as the beast went, I was very concerned about this country. I was very concerned about this country because no one stopped the beast from going into Israel with that army. Remember in the book of Daniel, it says, all those who had indignation against the holy covenant, he corrupted by flatteries. And then it says they collectively went into Israel, specifically into Jerusalem, trampled Jerusalem underfoot 40 and 2 months. So it was with a coalition that Jerusalem is going to be overtaken. And we all know by reading certain things in the Bible that it's not going to look good. But my problem was nobody stopped them. Nobody stopped them. How could they do this for 3.5 years when the USA is in power? So something happened to us, right? Now, back then, I said the U.S. had its hands tied. You guys go back in the archives about 6-7 years and see for yourselves. The U.S. had its hands tied. I said likely internally because of our division. Now, at that time, it was very tough to see that we would be divided so much. You haven't seen anything yet. There are a couple of political moves that will take place. It's going to further divide this country in a way that should be impossible. Unfortunately, in today's world, it is not, because people can no longer, it's almost like they have lost their ability to really see the outcome of their doings, right? But if you're a believer in Christ, the Lord often will gift his children with a way to see things where you can see the outcome of things simply by the speech of an individual. You can see where it goes. The Lord will often give you that. But we are incredibly divided, and that divide is about to really deepen. Right? It's about to really deepen. Now, of course, obviously, hopefully no Christian is a part of that divide, but the Bible tells us that many of the faithful, right, will have to be pulled away from that divide. The Lord's going to pull them away from that divide. If he didn't pull them away from that divide, they would have been consumed by rhetoric, right? These are scriptures that are normally not read in public. We're going to read them here because I believe in covering everything. But this division thing is just going too far. You know, you have states that are set up right now that are ready to part from governmental standards, right? Federal governmental standards. That being the case, you know, we're going to be so tied or so consumed with debate within ourselves, we're not going to be able to afford the personnel or have the coordinative abilities to stop what's happening in Israel. Now, remember, it happens for 3.5 years in Israel. So for 3.5 years, it's almost like we have our hands tied here. You guys know, and I know, that with the people over here, if something happened to Israel, right, that would bring an outcry from the U.S. That would be totally outrageous unless unless the people were duped so bad they no longer cared, unless people were so engaged with this political nonsense that they can no longer see. Because in the King James Version of the Bible, God said Israel had no ally. No ally. That bothers me to this very day. But you know what? That's the bitterness of prophecy. The powers of China. And that was just a little smidget of some tactical information that is real about China. It's not fake. This is real about China. And it's that's only the tip of the iceberg, as they would say. There's so many more facts about China, disturbing facts about China, as far as how far they've come, what the numbers truly are in support of their operations, how they think. And don't forget about North Korea. North Korea right now has been talking to China a lot. They're about ready to make a move on us, on the Western world, the entirety of the Western ideology, right? So we're going to see another reheat of things. Most of the time we see these issues in cycles. We get, it seems like somebody's pulling the strings. And when the Middle East gets too hot, they pull the strings. Everybody starts looking at North Korea. When that gets too hot, everybody gets burned out. They're tired of hearing the stories and everything. And nobody watches the news because they watch the ratings. Something else happens. If everything goes quiet, then we have an explosion inside the U.S. So they keep people engaged all the time, all the time, all the time. Which is why you see the stories switch at these opportune times to keep you engaged. Why? Truth be told, they need you. They need you. Not for the reasons you think, but they need. You're the entire point of these happenings at the end time, both for Satan himself and for our Father. You're the point. You're the element that this fight of darkness and light is over. You are. It's time for you to realize that, to know that, so that you don't step on the wrong side, which is darkness, and begin to believe what they're feeding you.